want to start with the idea that culture is not your friend, that it is a neutral force, a tool, a filter that can serve the purpose of waking us up through pain and pleasure, through contrast, that can wake us up to a level capable of transcending the culture, creating a conscious culture that can be our friend because it is consciously designed. So, within the examination of culture and the awareness that there are a tremendous amount of impediments between us and healthy connection with the other, let's explore some of the filters that fall within the paradigm of culture. So right here, we have us, we have the one. And everything out there is the other, is the circle, the environment. And whether that's another human being, a religion, a group of human beings, we have the one and we have the many. In between us is a series of filters of consciousness, filters of language that obscure the flow of that connection, that modulate and regulate the flow of that connection. So let's look at some of those things. And one of the first things that rears its head in our culture is male chauvinism that goes beyond gender into a chauvinism that values masculine energy ahead of feminine energy in all of its expressions. So let's look at a couple of these things. One of the things that this leads to is a shaming or a diminishment of feelings, particularly intense feelings, which are viewed as feminine, and an elevation of ideas, which are often rated on a level of interesting, the stimulation level of an idea, the cogency of an idea. So we have diminishment of feeling, elevation of ideas. You also have the diminishment of the inner, the elevation of the outer. You have an elevation of doing and a diminishment of being. You have a focus on the individual rather than a focus on the family or community. You have a get to the point mentality rather than enjoy the journey. This ties in with the ends justifying the means. And we also have a might makes right type of paradigm, male bodies being statistically bigger and stronger in combat. We have a might makes right framework where we respect mass, we respect size, bigger is better. We respect speed. It's often a little bit of a joke in our computer buying experience. The speed of the chip and the speed of this or that processor often is not as important as the way that the various components are woven and stitched together by the software and by the manufacturer. In other words, the user experience can be superior with chips of a lower speed and lower specs that are more sophisticatedly and integrally integrated than with these top-of-the-line things with poor software and poor connectivity between them. And this is just one of many of the prices we pay for the focus on chauvinism, the emphasis on the specs as opposed to the emphasis on relationship. And so these are a couple of the ways that we experience chauvinism. Now, chauvinism plays itself out in a variety of shames or taboos or hierarchies. And, one of them is unpopularity. It's shameful to be unpopular. And another is to be poor, is somehow demeaning to be poor. To be a racial minority or a minority of any kind, tying in with unpopularity, again, somewhat shameful. To be sick, to be old, to be young, to be dependent, other expressions of social ranking, to be powerless, to have pain, to be ignorant, to be needy, to have fear, to be caught doing something, to be unwanted, to be uncool, to be weak, to be emotional, to be marginalized. To be esoteric is in many ways something to be patronized. But in a variety of ways, the taboo, the shame we feel about being weak, which is acknowledging our interdependence, which is shifting the focus away from the individual to the group. We all exist in a framework of a group. To be in pain acknowledges vulnerability, again, piercing the illusion of chauvinism of the autonomous individual. And so we have a list of a variety of the things and to become old is, first of all, often associated with retirement, which is associated with being poor, also being more feeble and more old-fashioned. The new, the crisp, the young is, of course, consistent with male chauvinism. Now, the strategies that we hold chauvinism in place with are strategies of isolation. So shame in and of itself is, of course, a form of isolation, but so is the illusion of privacy. The idea that one should be able to privately suffer as a human right. But this is, of course, absurd because it's far more enjoyable to have company during traumatic times and to be known. So it's interesting the way the cult's abuses get pivoted round and become rights. It's an abuse to suffer alone. Technically, scientifically, in the biology of the body is more resilient suffering together than alone. So rather than fix the abuse, of course, the cult will rebrand the abuse as a human right, the right to privacy. We have the right to independence. Again, rather than acknowledging the reality of our interdependence and our right to be a part at the table, we split the cult into a ranking system where certain people come at the table and certain people cannot. And we exclude a tremendous amount of our people, and we rebrand that exclusion as independence. Lies are another way that we process shame and protect, and seeing somehow the virtue of not being seen. Oh, I'm fine. No, that didn't hurt me. No, I'm not angry about that, because to be intensely angry would be to be feminine and to something to be ashamed of. Dissociation as a way of dealing with both feelings and truths and taboos that the cult doesn't want to deal with. The statement, I don't need, these are various processes and coping mechanisms for dealing with shame. I don't need help. I don't need you. At the end of a relationship, which is invariably quite painful, as various hopes and dreams and the innate biology of the mirror neurons that form as a coupling takes place and you get to know a whole new identity in relationship to the other. If you're at all alive or empathic, you become a slightly different person or a dramatically different person in relationship to that other, and it dies when a relationship breaks up. And so rather than acknowledge the truth and the vulnerability of the feminine, of course, the statement is used to hide and denigrate the feminine. I don't need you, which on some level is true, but it is the masculine expression. On another level, I do need you. I need you to experience the part of me that only comes out with you. But that is, again, an honoring of the interdependence of any relationship. Silence, being, elevated. The right to silence. Could you keep that down? I don't want to talk about it. The right to silence relative to the right to being seen. And of course, people are seen as very rude in our culture or our cult for insisting on being seen, insisting on being heard, shouting if necessary, if we're that committed to silencing them, insisting on being heard and seen. And in that sense, the right of other people to be silent, excluding this thing like, I don't want to hear that, versus I want to be heard. We also have the goal of blending in, being normal, conformity, suppression, unconsciousness, forgetfulness, denial, projection of the taboo terrain within on others, and scapegoating. The idea that since any system that functions at all must have masculine and feminine components, it's just like electricity. You need the negative and the positive charge equally to have anything function or flow. So there is femininity in any system, but in a chauvinistic system, one of the coping mechanisms is to project one's feelings onto another person and turn them into what's known as the scapegoat, to have them carry the bag, carry the shame, carry whatever is unacceptable in the culture. And of course, we have different distinctions between each of us as individuals. We have paradigms. These are lenses that are broad lenses through which we process and examine reality. We have maps, which is another version of a paradigm, which is a heuristic micro-representation of reality. None of us have the consciousness capacity to truly grasp all of reality. And so we create little symbols to hold the space. That's what a map is. A map is not a counting of every pine needle of every tree. We would get lost in that map. Instead, a map shows the roads and the rough terrain, the street signs. It's a version of reality. And our paradigms and beliefs, etc., are a version of reality. They're not reality. Reality is much bigger and more complex than the human brain is capable of processing. We can't even remember, put back together, more than at most 50% of our sensory data. And so we're deeply limited in that sense. Value hierarchies are one of the things that separate us, because while every human being in history has the same values, they have them in a different order. No one places zero charge, meaning zero positive or negative value, on disgust or pain or a particular restaurant. Everyone places a value on everything. It could be a positive value, a negative value, and of course, for each person, the charge of the value. I hate that a lot. I hate that the most. I hate that a little bit. I hate it sometimes. It irritates me right now. These are negative charges at different intensities, and then there are positive charges at different intensities, and everyone has positive and negative charges on everything. They're just different. For one person, this thing is a positive. For another person, it's a negative for different reasons, seen through different maps, through different value hierarchies at different times. And of course, beliefs. We all have different beliefs. As Einstein said, one of the most significant beliefs is whether or not we believe the universe is a friendly place. Because if it is, we will embrace the unknown, go out into the wildness of the multiverse and explore with humility and wonder. And if the universe is an unfriendly place, then we will cling to our cults, to our cultures, to our status quo, to our limitations as protections from the vastness of the unknown.